So, distinguished guests and ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank UNCTAD and TRACIT for taking leadership on such a critical discussion on the alarming emergence of illicit trade and improving this public-private dialogue to share findings and, most important, I think, solutions across all industries. And thank you also, Jeff, and to your team for this excellent preparation of the past 2 days conference. The RJC, the Responsible Jewellery Council, is very honored to participate today because just like the other industries around the table, we're very committed to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. What we think is so remarkable about the goals is that they address the most urgent issues facing humanity today: economic disparity, human rights, climate change, political and social instability. And for the first time in history, which is so great, is that we have really a plan for peace, people, prosperity, and planet, with one message: leaving no one behind. And this, of course, also means gender equality, and empowering all women and girls needs to be prioritized. Now, this decade demands fundamental innovation across all the sectors, including our jewelry industry, and driving responsible business practices across the supply chain. So responsible business is legitimate business. Now, sustainability has been long on the agenda of many companies, but for decades, their environmental, social, and governance activities were always disconnected from the core business strategy. Many organizations take a more fragmented approach, a reactive approach, launching initiatives ad hoc to comply with regulations or just to deal with emergencies, rather than focusing really sustainability as an opportunity with a direct impact on business results. And what we see is that is changing, that mindset is changing. Material risks, not only to a company's reputation, but also to the bottom line, come from many, often unpredictable directions in an era of constrained resources and tighter regulatory requirements. In addition, the growing demand for responsible products and services must be developed with respect for human rights, labor practices, good corporate governance, and a positive environmental impact. And ultimately, this agenda is clearly a shared responsibility and a model of partnership and cooperation. It is all about how we share our economics and natural resources fairly in a world with a growing population, and it paves the way for all industries to accelerate economic development on the ground. And this brings me to the vision and the mission of the Responsible Jewellery Council. The Responsible Jewellery Council was founded in 2005 by 14 leading members: Tiffany, Cartier, Signet, De Beers, ABN AMRO, with a clear vision: a responsible wide supply chain that promotes trust in the global jewelry and watch industry. We're also a proud member of ISEAL and the UN Global Compact. As today we're in 2020, just 10 years away from the 2030 agenda, we believe we have as an organization a great opportunity to accelerate efforts on the ground. Trust is the ultimate currency, and we believe any company needs to build a solid framework on sustainability. Supply chains are often complex, multi-tiered, and that requires an integrated approach on human rights, labor rights, product integrity and disclosure, and environment. And we ask our companies to really start a journey on sustainability and to show progress. And the adherence to our code of practices is really the solid foundation. Now, today we have over 1,200 companies. So there we are in 2005, 14 founding members. Now as an industry, we have 1,200 leading companies that represent all sizes of the jewelry industry. The RJC was formed with the objective that jewelry should be responsibly sourced and manufactured. And we believe this is a process of continuous improvement. So we have a code of practices and a chain of custody. And the code of practices is about members' practices and management systems. So in other words, it is a standard. When a company joins the RJC, they start step-by-step a process. They do an internal risk assessment. They have a verification by a third-party accredited auditor, and we are looking at how they're implementing the standards across their supply chain. We acknowledge it takes time, it's very complex, and it needs a multidimensional approach, And you, of course, need to work closely with governments on the ground. So our code of practices is also reviewed on a tri-annual basis through multi-stakeholder consultation to ensure it remains up-to-date and relevant to emerging challenges and an evolutionary regulatory framework. Now, since launching the Code of Practices in 2009, we revised it in 2013 and 2019. The new COP is aligned with the OECD due diligence for conflict and high-risk affected areas and the UN guiding principles of business and human rights. And this is a critical element of the RJC system to prevent that illicit trade enters the supply chain. Due diligence requires detailed supply chain risk analysis and mitigation of red flags where necessary. The COP also requires stringent know your counterpart, including upstream and downstream of the supply chain. And also, again, this is helping as a critical tool in combating illicit transactions. The chain of custody addresses the flow of materials, in other words, through the supply chain, the materials, and it provides assurance in the metals produced, processed, and traded through the supply chain that they're responsibly sourced, which includes conflict-free as a minimum, and responsibly produced each step of the supply chain. And this standard includes different methodologies on the identification of tracking and control. Ladies and gentlemen, we as RDC are firmly committed to helping to put the Sustainable Development Goals into practice. In addition to the elements I've already mentioned, we are more closely integrating the SDGs into our engagement with members. In 2019, we've worked very closely with our members on webinars, trainings on the SDGs, and we're working closely on the implementation of the COP with a focus on human rights, gender equality, decent labor, responsible production, and climate. We as organization are very happy to share all the multi-stakeholder consultation and all the work that has been done and built over the 15 years with other organizations to combat illicit trade and support all industries in contributing to development. The RJC is taking these discussions over the past 2 days very seriously, and we want to continue to work with you closely to implement this code of practices in our industry and beyond the 1,200 members we have today. Finally, I wanted to share 2 important calls of actions today. One is the call for knowledge sharing across industries and awareness building to key stakeholders, including the consumer, on what the issues are in illicit trade, and more important, what are the solutions. Yesterday, I had the privilege to meet an inspiring lady, Monica Ramirez from ABM Bev, and we came to the same point that we have a shared responsibility to protect our markets and our products. Which each form of illicit trade has its own characteristics and drivers, research shows that the same criminal groups using the same routes, the same means of transport, and the same concealment methods behind multiple forms of illicit trade. So criminals will take advantage of the loopholes if we do not share information or connect with one another. And unless consumer demand is changed, the illicit trade will continue. Product integrity, also for our business, is critical. It's all about trust and the consumer, which is vital for the success of any industry to grow. Younger consumers, luckily, are continuing to demand action. Gen Z alone will make 40% of the global consumers this year, and they hold brands accountable. And this movement will not slow down. Expectations for companies to address these issues will just accelerate. And my second call for action is about partnerships. Let us not reinvent the wheel. Corporate sector innovation on responsible business practices means better supply chain management, helping to overcome corruption and lack of political motivation that have constrained the past efforts to tackle illicit trade. Our concerns about illicit trade are common. The efforts today are too scattered. And as well as governments and international organizations, we believe the private sector and our industry can play a critical role. In 2005, the RGC was at the forefront of building this standard on responsible business practices. We look forward to working closely with you to accelerate efforts. And to conclude, the industry has been increasingly proactive in combating illicit trade. The Kimberley process has been remarkably successful in stopping conflict diamonds from financing rebel movements. The RGC membership has increased indeed from 2005 to now today 1,200, but more needs to happen. We need to include much more smaller and medium-sized companies. However, we see that corruption, smuggling, and human rights abuses remain in the supply chain. Therefore, we believe that the implementation of our code of practices is critical to mitigate these risks. The application of supply chain due diligence is especially important today and can be one of the most effective tools to identify solutions. While business play a vital role, it's incumbent that all governments ensure legal frameworks that are fit for purpose and that our customs and borders force infrastructure is properly organized for the private sector. We do not have all the answers today, but we do look forward to working with the international community. And I think we know that we can find solutions together with everyone around the table. We can and we must, and I think we owe it to the generations to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Iris. That was a very nice speech. I like that. I thought that I'm not surprised, but I was surprised when you pointed out Monica and your conversation last night, because our mission statement, if you will, at TRACIT, there's two parts. One is to make governments more effective, help them become more effective, and the other is to help business become smarter. And that conversation and what you just said in your presentation is precisely what we mean by business smarter, is under the roof of TRACIT, bring in radically different industries. I doubt you have had probably too many dinners with the alcohol industry, for example, but radically different industries that are confronting the same problem and need similar solutions. And that's why I said in the introduction, I thought that what you're doing with the code is a terrific model that I really want to share around through the other industries. Maybe we can learn something. With your presentation, I also found it interesting, the graph with relating all the different SDGs. According to our work, in this report in the table, for example, your industry is vulnerable or is negatively impacted across the most SDGs. The second most, however, is Laurent, who's next in line, and is representing Syngenta, which has its operations in agrochemicals and pesticides. So any of you that are familiar with that, the legal industry of agrochem and pesticides is critical to achieving so many of the goals, right? Especially the ones that are around no poverty and zero hunger, because it's through the crop protection that where farmers around the world are able to increase their crop yield and therefore deliver food to accomplish many of the goals. So it's really important that not only that we address how illicit trade in this sector undermines the achievement of the goals, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about that, and I'm certain that a lot of people in the audience don't fully understand how important your industry is to sustainable development.
Thank you, Jeff. Do you have the remote control somewhere? Thanks, and thanks again to UNCTAD and TRACIT for organizing this very important event. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm probably not going to give you some good news about illicit trade and the agriculture. So let me remind you that the good news I have for you is this is the last presentation for today. And at least we start with this. I'm going to give you first a little bit of context, because Syngenta is not like is not a company that is so known. And as you said, Jeff, maybe the agriculture industry as well. So I'll say a few words about this. I will then touch on the SDGs and how do they connect not only to what we do to fight counterfeit, but also what we do as a company. I'll then explain the impact on the agriculture, impact of counterfeit and illicit trade in the agriculture. I will also then share what do we do about it, and so that you have a perspective about what are the efforts that we are taking. I'll also, from there, we'll give you some examples of what's going on, and then talk about the impact that we see as an industry. And then we will also, I will also close my roughly 10 slides on what we think are the key things we could achieve together. So, Syngenta, Swiss company based here in Basel, with a lot of investment, as you can see, on R&D, and 28,000 people operating in 90 countries worldwide. That's us. You see what is the size of our revenue. And if I move on to what are our ambitions, I would say that we want to be the best trusted partner with both the large-scale farming operations as well as, and more importantly, smallholders farms. And you can see the numbers are speaking by themselves, I guess, and you can imagine as well that you have developed countries where the farming activities are much more organized and consolidated, if I can say it that way. But there's many countries where there's a lot of small holders that are taking care of their crops. And that's an area that we focus on, of course. On the chapter 2, and Jeff, you showed the report 2 or 3 times already. So on the chapter 2 of that report, you will see a very good analysis that is done on the impact of illicit trade on the pesticide industry. And what we do at Syngenta is of course, really working into that direction. But also as a company, our goal is to really make agriculture more sustainable. And this is why we also have, and very much linked to the SDGs, develop at the size of the company, six very important goals that we call a good growth plan. And those goals are also very much linked to the SDGs. As you can see, we are talking about, as you mentioned, Jeff, make crop more efficient, increasing yield, rescue more farmland, because this is the availability of farmland is declining, and it's critical for the future of our planet that we rescue it. Help, of course, biodiversity. I mentioned already smallholders. Make people safe in the way they use the product, in the way they work in their farms. And this means for us look after every workers, both internally in our organization, but of course on the ground in the farms. If I move now to the size of the problem, I would say that if all the criminals would form a company, this company would be one of the largest companies. This tells you how big is the problem. They would, and the numbers are the numbers about the size of that company are, speculative, because it's of course a projection of what we think is this, and supported by the industry association. This analysis is telling us that it's not negligible at all. It's well known in many other industries, and my colleagues just before gave you examples, and you all know those examples. It's not so clear that pesticide, as well as seeds, I would say, are copied, both creating a number of challenges that I will expose later. So we think that for the crop protection market, and to that number we should add the seeds market as well, which makes the number even bigger. Syngenta is, if you like, capturing, of course, with strong partnership with law enforcement locally. Last year, we've been able to seize the equivalent of $350 million of fake products. This is compared to some of the the activities of some of the big countries in the field of agriculture. It is as large as the size of some of those countries in terms of business, or in terms of value or volume, if you like, to give you an idea of that proportion. I think in some analysis, that number is now the number of total illegal crop protection products has actually significantly increased, which is again the same message about the fact that it's a criminal activity that is developing very rapidly. Maybe I can say a few words about why, of course, we think this is developing rapidly. We regularly put ourselves into the shoes of the criminals. And we think about what is their benefit to operate in the space of agricultural products compared to other products where there is more awareness from countries, there is more awareness from law enforcement, and therefore more response. So as a criminal, if I want to make money, then I guess, and I'm just guessing, I would then take less risk, if you like, of being caught and take less risk of being challenged if I start to move from one country to the other fake pesticides or fake seeds. And that's why that number is, I'm sure, increasing and will increase even more in the near future. And that's why we need to take this seriously together. It cannot be the effort of a company. It cannot be the effort of an industry only. It has to be the effort of all of us in the room. And that's the only way for us, by increasing our partnership, that we will be able to reduce the ability of organized crime to operate. I'm not dreaming, I'm an optimist, but I'm not naive. So we'll not be able to stop it, that's for sure, but really challenge and reduce their ability to, the ability of the criminals to operate is extremely important. Some of my colleagues have already gave examples that you would see that you see on that slide here. Probably the one that is, again, not that pesticide is not the only problem that we have, because it's actually where we make biggest seizures and successes, if you like, in disturbing criminals. But in the seeds area, we see also a lot of challenges. Criminals are, for example, in many countries, due to weather and soil condition, we offer seeds that have a protection, if you like, so that they are ready to grow in a difficult environment. Criminals, they have seen those seeds with a sort of coating. Okay, it's colored, it can be pink or it can be light blue, for example. And so they take car painting and they just find seeds, they paint those seeds with paint that is used for cars, and they sell those seeds that way. So that's the sort of issue we have to deal with, and that's really a huge concern, because of course it means that the farmer is going to buy seeds, is going to plant them, is going to maybe then also buy fake pesticide products to ensure his production, and the seeds are not going to grow, and the little that they will grow, they might be destroyed by the fake pesticides. So that's really a drama. And talking about drama, I can show you here the example of absolutely dramatic conditions in which, of course, those fake products are produced. This is in Brazil. This is, of course, this tells us that, of course, the products are miles away from any quality or any regulation, needless to say. But it also means that the poor people that are working into those mini factories employed by criminals are exposing their health at a high level, of course. And then what we start to see is very large-scale production. This is Ukraine. This is giving us an idea of the size of the problem. It's not only Ukraine. By that I mean this is what we do, what we seize with the authorities in this country are products that are distributed in all countries around that area of the globe. And that tells us that now the criminals are really going to industrialize, if you like, the illegal production of pesticide. And of course there are effects on other industries. John was talking about the production of beer in a number of countries where, of course, farmers that are contributing or that are working in this area, they rely on safe products to get their final, the production of their farm to the market. And this is where we see connection as well between one industry and another. So maybe the first one are obvious element of exposures, brand and reputation. We also see when markets are completely infected by counterfeit, significant issues in tax, as you are all aware. Health issues are notorious. As I said earlier, some fields are destroyed by products that are applied on those fields and that are, of course, not what they are supposed to be, creating as well environmental risk. Then also generating some waste issues from all those productions. And finally, and almost most importantly, generate what we call resistance management, which might not be that obvious. So resistance management is about how insects or pests in a given geography are supposed to be tackled by a specific product to ensure the right yield. And then farmers may then simply be fooled by criminals and believe they buy the product that is going to remove those pressure, and actually they don't. And therefore, it takes sometimes far too long to realize that all those insects or pesticides, all those pressure on the yield are increasing because of the wrong application or the application of a product that is not what it's supposed to be. I think sharing best practice in partnership is important as well, or at least practice, I should say. So practice here in a very short version, what do we do on the element of anti-counterfeiting? Those three pillars are explaining in there how important engagement with stakeholders is key. Like other industries, developing new technologies to authenticate and also make the product more difficult to copy is key as well. And enforcement with, of course, close collaboration with police, custom, and other law enforcement organization is key. In the lower part on how we do this, there's, of course, from left to right, increasing communication, because we need to increase the awareness, as this is not so common yet. The counterfeit and illicit trade in the agriculture industry. The collaboration within our industry, but also with other industries, is also important, because we can learn from others and learn from people that have been dealing with this for much longer than the agriculture industry. I mentioned already some of the authentication technology, and I would finish with this slide by saying that intelligence is key. We are more and more using big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to help us connect the dots. Criminals are super smart in the way they operate, from the production in one country, the distribution, transshipment in another location, final destination. All of this extremely complex to investigate, and therefore the use of technology to be able to help us find leads that we then, of course, call big fish, are extremely important. Final slide, and the final slide is about what is our ask. So it's about having that legal framework that we can that will enable effective enforcement. Partnership and partnering, if I can say, again with the application of best practice. Share resources. As I said earlier, there is share resources on practices, but also on intelligence. All the work that we are doing in connecting the dots is ultimately going to be useless if we only keep this for our own little garden, and we really need to share this with a larger group. So really it's about working together, which I think is the way I'm going to close my point here. Working together will be the way for us to increase the way we fight counterfeit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurent. Can you go back to slide 8 for a sec? Yeah, that one. You know, in my opening remarks in introducing you, I was talking about how the fakes, you know, aren't going to effectively fight pests and could limit crop yield. But when I saw this slide, you know, it made me think there's another major problem here too. Farmers are, you know, buying these products. They don't know what kind of chemical that is. That's a heck of a mess there. I mean, when those types of chemicals are applied, you're also contaminating the water and the land, the soil, right? And that undermines crop production and crop yield and undermines our ability to meet the goals. So, I mean, this is another area that we need to address. And I hope, as your moderator, I've been able to pull together a panel to give you a little bit of insight of just how diverse this problem is. The sectors are vastly different sectors that are all vulnerable to illicit trade in one way or another. And this is just 4. You know, if I hold this up again, you know, we're working in 8 other sectors, and I wanted to have 8 other speakers, but my colleague Graham at the UNCTAD said, no, Jeff, no, you can't have a panel with 12 speakers. But we are doing work, and I want to draw attention to the fact in agri-foods and coffee, for example, coffee smuggling and sugar smuggling is a big problem. Counterfeiting and piracy, we had a presentation on the first day from P&G there, but forestry, illegal fishing, petroleum, trafficking in persons, trafficking in wildlife, we heard from Yvonne yesterday, and of course tobacco. That's one of the biggest problems in illicit trade. You heard every government speaker that was sitting up here in my spot over the last 2 days has mentioned the difficulty in dealing with the illicit trade in tobacco. So that's certainly an important area of work. So that is going to conclude our presentations. Following the protocol here, the floor is open for statements or for any brief questions for the panelists. And as you all think about whether you want to intervene, I'm going to put Diageo on the spot because John mentioned in his presentation the cassava beer that they're making, and the Eagle brand that's in Zambia and Uganda, and the Magnifica that's sold in Brazil. Well, the Secretary General, in his opening remarks, some of you may recall, mentioned his experience. He's Kenyan, and when he was trade minister there, Diageo had introduced a similar product. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is because this is really creative thinking on the part of the businesses, right? This isn't just about knocking on the door of government saying, this is illegal activity, this is your fault, you know, this is your responsibility, you need to strengthen customs, you need to do this, you need to do that. This is an excellent example of the creativity and the willingness of the businesses to invest, to find solutions to illicit trade. So since the Secretary General did mention it, and John mentioned it, I thought maybe you could just briefly tell us a little bit more what he was talking about.
Thanks, Jeff. Nothing like being put on the spot. I wanted to just start by saying thanks. I think it's been an incredible conference, and to to have the opportunity to speak to people through UNCTAD and listening to the other companies as well. The thing that really surprises me but also enthuses me is how similar many of the challenges are, and how actually that ability to look at the size of the market but also then look at what activity we can do either through different sectors or working jointly together to share that information, but also to share some of the expertise, I think is really incredible and really exciting. I won't go into great depth about Senator Keg, because I think John's done a great example of talking about the work they've done at AB InBev. The example's quite similar for Senator Keg in that in Kenya in the early 2000s, there was a huge rise in the informal alcohol markets. In about 2001, it accounted for about 56% of the total market, and it was growing. So something we were incredibly concerned about, and something the Kenyan government were very concerned about. So what we did was we decided to work with sorghum farmers to create a beer from sorghum, so creating about 12,000 jobs for sorghum farmers and identifying a product that was actually quite close in price to where the illicit market was, so trying to move people from illicit alcohol into regulated alcohol. We saw huge benefits. The government's revenue increased. We moved a number of people from the illicit alcohol market into the regulated alcohol market, created more jobs, created more distributors, so more legal distributors. As John touched on, you know, we're not in the market of saying we want to reduce our taxes, but at the same time, these products where you're moving people from illicit market into the legal market are highly price sensitive. So when the Kenyan government did make some changes to the remissions on the beer, we saw the spike in illicit go up and actually the revenue for government fall. Thankfully, the Kenyan government listened very closely to what we were saying and looked at the figures, and actually they then introduced the remission back up again so that people could continue to benefit from, you know, not just the benefit of having a legally produced product that wouldn't put their health at risk, but actually were then contributing back into the Kenyan tax take so that they could then do more work in the working society. It also enabled Diageo to invest. So through the work that we did with Senator Keg, we were able to invest in a new brewery, and we're continuing to make inroads into the illicit trade. So just, I suppose, the reason I wanted to share this is because the work that AB InBev do, the work that the Diageo does, the work that other producers do around the world is actually, it's quite similar, and we've got expertise, we've got learnings that we can share with governments, with others. You know, we've got the expertise in creating products and creating opportunities for people within the country, but also, you know, John talked about the work we've done with Euromonitor, and I know that Monica's worked very closely with my previous colleagues in creating this sort of data set. We're all really invested in trying to find a solution that's based on the data and actually trying to take a consistent approach to tackling illicit. Often we see from governments where there's been a challenge, but perhaps a spike or someone that's died or a number of people have died from illicit consumption, actually that's when it starts to come to the fore and when they're concerned. But actually, you know, some of the mapping work that people have done, you can see the countries where there are the biggest challenges and actually starting to be quite ruthless about how we go into those countries and work together to try and tackle the problem is really important. So I hope this example is interesting to you. There's more detail uploaded in the documents for the conference, but also just I suppose an acknowledgement from me that we really, you know, we want to do more. We're keen to talk and keen to work with others around the table. So thanks to Jeff and the team for organising this conference, and also the team at UNCTAD. It's been a fantastic opportunity, and I think it just gives us the stepping stones to do more and more. So thanks.